Nigeria, according to statistics, has one of the lowest world collection rates when it comes to tax in the world, about 10.8%, compared to the GDP. What's your take on this? Why do you think we have this kind of figure, one of the lowest tax collection in the world?
Well, thank you, presenter. I want to thank you for this privilege given to me to be part of this program, to hear my view on the current tax policies and tax implementation in Nigeria. Well, we all know our country being what we have in terms of tax process, tax collection and administration. Of course, I won't dwell too much on the challenges that we've been having, but we all know that Nigeria, as a whole, is very dynamic and a multifaceted country in the community of nations. Of course, Nigerians' tax policy has developed and metamorphosed into different stages and up to where we are today. We have been having a lot of tax reforms, regulations. We have been amending just to ensuring that it suits the present economic environment. Of course, you all agree with me that during the time of COVID, there was a finance act that was promulgated, and up to now, we've still been battling with one amendment or the other. Yeah, you see, Nigeria, we are in such a country that we have so much, how will I put it, so much hydro resources that we cannot be able to tap. That is, we have not been able to gravitate the modality to be able to harness it very well. Of course, just you have rightly said, we have so much challenges that are bedeviling Nigerians' tax policy that has made us not to grow from where we are. And just as you said, that when you look at the ratio of our GDP to tax, it's quite very low. Even in African nations, Nigeria is still, battling with between 5% to 6% until maybe 2 or 3 years ago that it grew. We were able to grow to maybe 10 point something percent, but that's not too bad. That's not too bad, at least in the trend of the years that we've been having. But we are not doing enough. In Africa, we have the lowest, one of the lowest GDP, tax to GDP ratio, and we need to do more in that. Of course, you just asked about the challenges. One of it, majorly, we have a lot of hidden economy. There's so much that we've not been able to harness properly into our tax net in this country. Few of it is just the digital economies. Of course, digital economies is so wide, so humongous, and so has a lot of potential for us to be able to harness, but we are not serious about that in this country. But I want to say that some of all these things needs to be looked into. Of course, when you look at our even tax laws, a lot of instability in our tax law. We have one law today, another law tomorrow, a lot of amendments here and there. All these policies, all these tax laws are not encouraging. We should be able to be stable with our tax policy. Of course, the act of professionalism in the collection process is dwindling in this tax world, particularly in Nigeria, which we need to look into. And also, we've not been able to move away from our traditional means of tax collection. When I mean traditional means of moving away from, the traditional means of tax collection revolves around the manual process. But I think the whole world, we are not in jet age. IT is everywhere. We need to graduate from that traditional way to a digital way of collecting taxation, or kind of automation IT, use of technology to be able to enhance our tax revenue, and also to block all leakages. Of course, we all know that because of the fact that we have been overburdening our oil revenue, and that is why we fail to look at the other revenue, which is taxation. Of course, we all know that quite as usual, what people used to say, Nigeria is a mono economy. We have been tailoring towards oil revenue, but I think it's high time we look at other revenue, particularly taxation, and it's going to be a cash cow if Nigeria is able to look at that critically. Thank you.
All right, let's look at some of the various types of taxes in Nigeria. Let's look at their roles and how significant they've been over the years and the need for reforms. If you look at some of these, an example is value-added tax, personal income tax. So let's look at some of these taxes and then how successful, if in your own opinion, they've been over the years.
Thank you very much. Well, let me start by saying that we have different types of taxes. Of course, we have the personal income tax, which can be divided into two. Of course, pay as you earn, and personal income tax from other groups of the societies. Of course, we have the company income tax, we have the capital gain tax, and we have petroleum tax and value-added tax. Also, we also have other taxes like excise duty and excise duties, import duties, and others. But let me just narrow it down to real tax, which borders on direct and indirect. Of course, we all know that over time, Nigeria has evolved various tax laws, amendment to suit the current economic dictates. Of course, when you look at, I want to mention personal income tax. When you look at personal income tax, which is a direct tax, Nigerians have a lot of opportunity to harness resources, a lot of tax revenue from that. When you look at personal income tax, I would say that Nigeria, we have not really grown it to ensure that large populace are able to comply with this. Let me take, for instance, look at the informal sector. Informal sector, I'm happy that Nigeria was able to come up with PITA, what we call PITA, Personal Income Tax Amendment Act in 2011, which was able to revolutionize payment, personal income tax, which is PIT, and being extended to informal sector. Of course, when we are talking of informal sector, they are the people, they are the class of or categories of taxpayers that don't pay, that don't keep records. But I tell you, they form more than 90% or 80% of the populace in this country. Of course, we have the artisans, we have the market, we have lots of them. But how have we been able to harness these taxpayers into our tax net? It has been a problem. It has been a problem. The personal income tax that we are talking about, predominantly have been harnessed from the salary earners, and which I think it should be expanded beyond that. Of course, the informal sector can be grown, and we also have the categories of individuals, the personalities, the high net worth individuals that have been hidden. We've not been able to capture them. Of course, we all know that our data collections have been very porous in this country, but I think we can do more to be able to look at that very well. And of course, I'll keep on saying that our major stakeholders, which is the bank, that the government can really use to harness some of all these things. Of course, we have potentials to grow very well. Then that is on a personal income tax. But we can also look at the corporate tax. Of course, corporate tax a company income tax has been doing very well, and which is handled by the Federal Inland Revenue. I think Federal Inland Revenue can seek to do more. Of course, we have been having a lot of reforms. Of course, we have the recent Finance Act that has been able to grant the turnover, you have 25 million, this is how much you pay, 30 million, this is how much you pay in terms of rate. Yes, which is very good to encourage industry. But I think we can still do more on the collection process. We might not necessarily need to increase our tax rates, but what we need to do is to expand our tax base. Our tax base is wide in this country. There are so many companies that are not complying with tax payments, but I think the Federal Inland Revenue Service can still do more on that aspect. Ditto to states when it comes to the implementation or the enforcement of the personal income tax. But by and large, corporate tax, of which is company income tax, has been doing very, very well. So it has been contributing enormously to the bottom line of tax in Nigeria. Of course, value-added tax, of course, very, very fantastic. We all know that VAT is a consumption tax, which dwells on what we buy and what we sell. So, but I think we can still do more because there are a lot of transactions that are being mitigated against being vatable. And that is why we have constant review of items that are vatable, items that are not vatable, and this thing. But I think increasing VAT rate to me is good, but I think we have the effect of it on goods and services, which we all know, whether we like it or not. Of course, we transfer the cost to the final consumer. It still speaks on inflation, but I think we should do more. The government should do more to expand the base rather than looking at the rates. Of course, value-added tax has been doing very well. Of course, it's being contributed or it's been distributed or been given to the three tiers of government. The federal government, I think 15%, the state government 50%, and the local government has its own shares of it. But I think we can do more on that. There are a lot of transactions that goes unvatable, but which legitimately they are vatable. Of course, we have other taxes as well, import duties, excise duties, and some of other charges and levies that governments can annex very well. But I think we can do more by providing adequate infrastructures, governance, so that there will be a voluntary compliance on the part of the populace. Of course, Nigerians are willing to comply once governments on the other side can be able to justify what they do with taxes. So personal income tax and company income tax and VAT, they constitute large portions of tax to the bottom lines of tax revenue in Nigeria. Of course, petroleum profit tax is also there, which I think it's also very large. But I think we can still do more to be able to harness some of all this by looking into our tax law, by looking into our ethics code of conduct and professionalism in the act of collecting some of this tax revenue. Of course, lastly, I will mention that most of all these tax houses, relevant tax authorities are not being professional. They need to do more. They need to go all out there. They need to be creative. They need to explore technology to be able to drive their revenue, which I think is the new order now, being embraced by most relevant tax authorities. Federal government, on the part of Federal Inland Revenue Service, they are not relenting in that. Just of recent, they were able to promulgate laws or develop a kind of IT to be able to drive gaming revenue. But I think they can still do more on some of all these things by doing a kind of peer review, by studying what happens in other climates, how are they doing it better, such that we can be able to harness our tax revenue. But largely, government needs to prove to the society that tax revenue is being utilized effectively and efficiently.
Right, still on the issue of value-added tax, you're aware that there was this tussling between the Federal Inland Revenue and some state tax collection agencies about who has the statutory when it comes to the collection of value-added tax. What do you make of this development, about this clash of interest, and what should be done to ensure that these are well spread out in order to ensure that there's no clash of interest when it comes to tax collection, especially VAT this time around?
Well, there are two sides of a coin. Well, VAT, according to law, is collected by federal governments. And when it is collected, it is being shared among the three tiers of government. Of course, the local governments, the state governments, and federal governments. I know that about 1 or 2 years ago, there have been this clamor that there should be a derivation. There should be a derivation factor of VAT, such that the VAT that is being collected in each state should go back to their state. In fact, the state should be in charge of the VAT that happens in their domain. But it is about law, and of course, unless there's an amendment to that. But in my own opinion, I believe that that phenomenon or that system is something that we should be looking into. Like when you look at Lagos State and when you look at River State, and Ogun State, some other states, they contribute large chunk of VAT to the federal government. But by the time it is being distributed, of course, they have various formula they deduce. So how do you expect a state that is lying out, that is just there, that they are not ready to harness their own resources, they are not able to think outside the box, the academic activities, economic activities is so low, and you expect them to share the same thing with other states like Lagos and Rivers. So, but I think that aspect needs to be looked into. Some states can afford to fold their arms, and after all, whether we like it or not, revenue will come to my state, and part of this revenue includes VAT. So it is demotivational to other states. It is not encouraging to other states to look inward. I mean, to look inward and be able to harness their resources, because most of these VAT collections, huge amount of VAT that's been collected by this state goes to the federal courts, and the federal courts will now distribute it in their own way to every state according to the formula. But this is not too ideal. But I think presently, because of the nationality that we embrace, and because of federal character principle, I think we need to still look at that until maybe another world when we have a very good even development in this country. Of course, agitation of other states that no, this won't happen. But like we have a region in this country. Of course, let me mention to the specific North. Of course, they feel that if VAT goes down the issue of derivation, they felt they might be shortchanged compared to southern part of this country. But I think they should look inward as well to be able to harness more, tap other resources that are lying idle here. Most of them rely on oil, and they believe that oil is there, and once there's allocation, they are going to get their own shares part of it. I think it's not too good. But for now, my candid opinion is that we can still leave it at this because of the nationality and the federal character principle. We want to grow, and we cannot leave our brothers and sister states to be shortchanged in some of all these national resources called Commonwealth. But I believe that by the time we're able to get there, we have system structure, institutional development. We have pragmatic development in this country. We have a lot of infrastructures that are put in place. We have working economies. Then we can begin to think of that derivation of VAT. But I tell you, the view, the school of thought being embraced by those states are not out of place or out of content. They are very, very much in order. But we need to look at the Nigeria as a republic, the Nigeria as a national, Nigeria as confederation. So that is the way, I mean federation, and that is the way we have to look at it for now. Thank you.
All right. The federal government has set up a tax reforms committee to look at the issue of tax regulations and harmonize all the taxes you have in Nigeria. The committee is being headed by Taiwo Yedele, you know, and they are targeting the GDP ratio to tax about 18, at least 18%. How optimistic are you? Do you think this is going to see the light of the day? And what is your, what's your thought about these reforms, and then how soon will it turn to reality?
Yes, thank you. Taiwo Oyedele, too much I know about him is someone that I believe he can turn around the tax reforms. From his background, we all know that he's a tax expert, and he knows what he's doing and what he's coming up with. Well, tax reforms, we actually need it. There are a lot of loopholes in our tax system, and which we have to look at. I believe that by the time he's able to co-opt various professionals, various technocrats on board, I mean, not theorists, not people that read textbooks alone, but people that actually in practice, people that actually know that on field, that feel the heat, that knows what it is, come on board and be able to join hand with him to reform this tax in Nigeria. Of course, our president, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, of course, we're doing the right thing, trying to put the round peg in a round hole by bringing on board people that are resumed, people that are very, very good in tax policy. Over the years, we've not been having that. But I think there will be a kind of a paradigm shift in these tax reforms, and there are going to be a lot of changes. But we might not be able to see the effects now, because some of the changes we have to go through legislation, some of the changes we have to go through a lot of pronouncements that we need to test. But by and large, it's coming to fruition. And it's coming to fruition would mean that our GDP, our tax to GDP, will begin to rise. Will begin to increase by the time some of all these things begins implementation. But I think Nigeria should, the tax policy, I mean, the reform, the committee should also think outside the box by looking at microeconomies, by looking at hidden economies, by looking at those economies that have been very, very complex and difficult to be able to harness revenue from, despite the fact that they generate huge amount of revenue from this, huge amount of income from this country, but they have been escaped, been taxed. So they need to look at our tax laws. They need to look at the legislations. They need to look at the implementation modalities, and they need to look at the technology, which is very, very important. But I think I have so much credence in this tax reform, because I know the step they have begun justifies that they are going. But my advice to them is we should look less of a increase in rates, which I think, to me, according to my school of thoughts, is not a too good system or indices to be able to heighten revenue. But we can look at the base, expansion of our base. Our base is very, very crucial, because you can't have less than 30% of populace contributing tax or paying tax. We need to expand it. We need to do a lot of data collection. We need to be able to harness and work with corporate organizations, work with government establishment like CAC. We need to look at that. We need to work with banks. We need to be able to look at the areas we are not looking at. There are a lot of idle resources that we can look at. We are not looking at solid minerals in this country. So that I believe that this committee will be able to do justice to some of all these areas that we have not been looking at in the previous years in this country.
Let's look at this issue of tax invasion. You agree with me that's one of the issues to contend with. How can government tackle this issue of tax invasion in spite the level of awareness, in spite the level of education? You still see that this still persists. How can this be addressed?
Well, thank you for this. Of course, evasion and tax avoidance are things that they are part of the system, tax drive system, in terms of tax administrations and tax policies and enforcement. Well, it's one of the major bane of our revenue growth in this country, particularly taxation. Like, before I even dwell on this particular tax evasion, we will not talk about tax business or enterprise in this country without mentioning governance. Governance is very key to every nation, and that is the benchmark we need to look at. Permit me to make reference to United Kingdom. Of course, major source of revenue to that country is tax. But I've seen someone that came into this country that willingly visited a relevant tax authority that I want to pay my tax. I just came back from this country. That is to say that the culture that has been imbibed in that person brought it into Nigeria. But I think there's a need for government to change its attitude towards tax enterprise vis-a-vis governance. We need to do more in terms of governance. Governance trigger a lot of things. And when governance is in place, of course, we might not have everything provided by the government, but government should be seen to be thorough, should be seen to be able to make use of this tax revenue for development and for the progress of the communities, of the societies. Yeah, the issue of evasion, we cannot totally erase it in the tax world, but we can only mitigate it by a lot of systems in place. One, proper enforcement needs to be done, need to be embraced by various relevant tax authority. Of course, enforcement goes very, very critical and is very, very important. The act of enforcement comes with a lot of things. Once we have proper tax procedures that are being followed, I want to call on tax administrations, the various tax administrators, to really look into this. And that is why we have a lot of litigations, tax litigation, objections and all that. That's why I also mentioned that the professionalism is very, very key. Our tax administrator must embrace professionalism in the act of doing their business, the tax business. Of course, we have statutory numbers of days, or we serve notice and assessment, you do all that. There are statutory numbers of days. But by the time some of all these things are not kept, you will see some of all these taxpayers hiding under tax avoidance, under the loopholes. And that is very, very critical. We need to embrace an holistic tax administration, effective tax administration very, very well. And enforcement comes into this. Enforcement is the last thing. Of course, you can't enforce without following the normal procedures. Enforcement must be able to kill once you have that. Of course, another aspect we can look at is most of our laws should be amended such that various stakeholders, such as banks, can be really discussed with. But the law has been very, very critical to pass, because the most affected people are the bourgeoisie of the society, the crime of the society. Failure of most of our crimes of the society to declare their income is a major lacuna that the government needs to look at. But how will government be able to chase them? Most of our rich men don't pay taxes. Just for instance, the implementation, I'm looking at Abuja, for instance, the implementation of property tax in Abuja. How do you think we can harness it? Yes, we can harness it, but there will be a lot of resistance in this until we have enabling, the wherewithal to be able to go into that. So our implementation is another area. We need to look at our implementations, our tax, tax. We need to look at it very well. For instance, if we have property tax that, or maybe land charge that you are expected to pay, but willingly, people are not ready to pay unless you are able to serve them the notice, you are able to enforce, and some of all these things. So I think our enforcement need to grow very well. Then another aspect is looking at our law. We need to look at a law that are friendly to the society. We must not have a Draculian law. We must not have too high-handedness law. Like, to me, the increase of value-added tax from 5% to 7.5% is how would I put it, is not is unproductive. Is a quick avenue to drive away the real sectors of this economy, to really relegate them to background. This, of course, whether we like it or not, it's one part of the cost.